Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. Today, I have a very special guest who's known to be unlike most bureaucrats, free, frank with his views and what he will speak to you in private, which is what he writes in his articles and which is what he even speaks from public platforms. Never the one to hold back words. You would have guessed it right if you follow the bureaucracy in India. He is Mr. Anil Swarup, the former Secretary, Ministry of Coal. He was also in the Ministry of School Education, which is the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Also was in the project monitoring group attached to the Cabinet Secretariat. So all of this, but why are we interviewing him today? Reason being, he wrote an article very interestingly titled "Bureaucracy: What's the Price to be Paid for Being Honest?" Now you may think that the Indian bureaucracy is known to be corrupt, or you would see news reports to that effect many times in newspapers, many times in international publications. Well, I must tell you, he also defends the bureaucracy by a thing which is called nexus of good. But even then, when he writes this article, it piques our interest. And Mr. Anil Swarup, thank you so much for giving us your time for this episode of Policy and Politics. So first question, why this article?
This article was necessitated on account of the wrong impression that people have about the civil service. What you get to read in the newspapers is an exception, and the public tends to believe that's the rule. There are, like in any segment of the society, there are few dishonest people, there are few wrongdoers, but that's not the general tenor. I think generally the bureaucrats are efficient, they're honest, they do their job. There is an old saying, दिखाई कम दिया करते हैं, दिखाई कम दिया करते हैं, इमारत के पत्थर, ज़मीन में दब गए जो, इमारत उन्हीं पे कायम है. So they remain below the ground and they're never visible. They get visible only for negative things. So anything wrong happens, it hits the news headline and everyone feels that every bureaucrat is corrupt. I don't think that's the case. I put in 38 years, I've interacted with a lot of them. I think most of them are honest and efficient.
Okay, and if I may quote you, from your article, you say, we say in India have our own brand of bureaucracy, which is castigated, pilloried, used, abused, harassed, yet pampered, cultivated and cajoled to assist in policy formulation. You go on to say that corruption lies at the top of the shack. However, the moment we talk of corruption, a number of questions immediately crop up, which say, is the entire bureaucracy corrupt? Does the present day bureaucrat have a choice to remain honest? Very, very important question that you have raised. Has the choice become limited over a period of time? You're indicating too many things here.
So I do believe that even today the bureaucrat has a choice to remain honest. In fact, more so now than ever before. The reason is very simple. It is, as I have often said, it is practical to be honest. In a well-informed public opinion, with more and more transparency coming in, with the media becoming all the more intrusive in what is happening, I think it is difficult to be dishonest because dishonesty will get exposed much more now than ever before. So, as I keep saying, honesty is not merely a good policy, it's a good practice as well.
And then you read one more very interesting question. Can bureaucrat afford to be honest?
Indeed.
Indeed, he can.
Indeed. The reason is very simple.
Yes.
A bureaucrat has to decide what he wants in life. He can. In the IS, you can. You have a choice. I can't talk about other services. The government looks after you pretty well. So you have a choice to remain honest. If you don't remain honest, it's a choice that you've made and you pay a price for it. So each bureaucrat has to take this call. He can and he should take that call.
And very interestingly, I was speaking to an industrialist just before I came for this interview with you. And he was telling me, because I told him that I'm going to interview Anil Swarup, and he tells me, Tarun, I must tell you one thing. If a joint secretary or a secretary has put his comment on a file, unless he himself decides to be a part of a certain system, it's very difficult to change that decision. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, why not? I mean, if I have the courage of conviction, I'll write what I have to write. I have never told my joint secretaries or officers below me to write what I wanted them to write.
Okay.
It's their call. They should write what they should write. And if, as I said, if I know my job, I should be able to overrule him if I have to overrule him. As simple as that.
And I go to the next three questions which you raised. Does the politician, the prime decision maker, want integrity in the bureaucracy? You also ask, what is the price to be paid for remaining honest? Is just being honest sufficient for the bureaucrat? Very interesting questions.
You know, let me start with the last one, which should appear in my next article.
Yes.
I have firmly believed that honesty is something which the bureaucrat should be. but that's not where it stops. He's paid to be efficient. He's paid to deliver on the ground, because merely being honest doesn't really help. In fact, in some cases, if you don't work efficiently, it can be very, very counterproductive. I have known of very honest bureaucrats thinking that everyone else is corrupt, and they go about witch hunting, thereby creating an environment where decision-making stops. It's very unfortunate if that happens. Bureaucrats should be honest, but equally important is his ability to deliver on the ground. But what really matters is not what I am, but what I deliver, because the common man is concerned more about what is happening on the ground rather than what I am.
So, as an officer whom most young IAS officers look up to, would you say that you fear the honest but inefficient bureaucrat because he can be much more dangerous to the system and business as a whole?
No, I don't fear anybody. I am only merely making this statement that being honest, आप किसी पे एहसान नहीं कर रहे हैं. You have to be honest, as simple as that. But being only honest can be extremely dangerous, because ultimately what matters is what we do on the ground. Because the people expect action from us. Honesty is more personal. Action is for others. So if I don't act and merely remain honest, it doesn't really serve the purpose for which I have come into the service.
And if I may ask you, now every service in India has got associations. There is Central IAS Association, there is the Income Tax Officers Association, there is an association for excise officers, and so on and so forth. Do these associations, in this case the Central IAS Association, stand up for the honest bureaucrat?
They do. You look at how the entire association stood behind Mr. Harish Gupta. He is known to be honest. The whole association has backed him. So the association does stand for honest officers. Obviously, in an association, there could be, on occasions, not in this case, there could be a difference of opinion. So be it. That's how an association is. But in case of Mr. Harish Gupta, Mr. Samria, Mr. Krofa, I think association took a stand and stand unanimously to stand behind these honest officers.
And if I may ask, you've written another article, and since you brought up the issue of advice, you say that Vinod Rai faulted in his advice to former coal secretary. What do you mean?
No, he didn't give any advice to the coal secretary.
Yes.
What I said was,
yes,
a lot of what Vinod Rai says is correct.
Okay.
There was a lot of wrong that was done in coal scam.
Yes.
But what I also say is that he should have gone into the details of each mine to determine as to what went wrong in each case of each mine. They can't be averaging. To give you an example, the cost of mining varies from, say, 300 to 400 rupees to anywhere between 2,500 to 3,000 rupees. So if that is the cost of mining of different mines, how can you come at an average additional value of 295 rupees as Vinod Rai did? As an AG, he should have examined each mine to determine what went wrong in each case, consequent to which he could have easily come to the conclusion in which all cases was there a wrong done, rather than across the board. And if you look at it, ultimately, all the 204 mines were cancelled, some of which were not even in the AG report. I mean, the courts went up to, if I remember correctly, 1991. So if you make generalization, you come to such general conclusions. To my mind, that was incorrect. That is one. Number two, the manner in which the AG report was shown to the media, that is etched in my memory. The Deputy CAG actually raising her hand and flashing the report before the media was something very unusual. I think the job of a CAG is to lay the report on the table of the House, and if a media interaction is required, it should be a staid media interaction answering questions, rather than trying to show off a particular report which purportedly had some sort of a scam. I don't know whether there was a scam or not. I mean, that's a subjective judgment. But my contention is, yes, they were wrong done. They should have been laid bare. But only the wrong should have been laid bare. You can't make a general comment on it that was the loss or the notional loss to the coal blocks. He could have easily determined the actual loss, actually.
So you mean great wrong could have been done without even realizing that wrong was being done during those days?
I'm sure. I don't think it was intended. I don't say that Mr. Rai intended that. I think it was an unintended consequence of something which he did, of which, as a CAG, you should have been much more careful.
So, retrospect gives you now the luxury of assessing what in future shouldn't be done. A, not rushing to the media with report and highlighting, which the CAG wouldn't have done in any other report, because
normally it's not done. I mean, it's never done that way. It was never done in the past. Yet there were media interactions. You can have a media interaction, answer the question, but you don't have to flash a report, raising your hand and saying, here you are, there is some scam.
I'm taking you to two very interesting terms that you've used, Nazrana and Jabrana. The shift from Nazrana, a practice of giving gifts to emperors, kings as recognition of their tutelage, to Jabrana, extortion by state agencies, including the bureaucracy, is a serious cause for concern and requires to be addressed. More sophisticated pseudonyms for corrupt practices have been evolved over the years, and then you say something very worrying, that corruption is now a way of life and we have all accepted it. I have seen very interesting observation among bureaucrats who later join the private sector or resign from services. They are all praises for the service when they are in the service. But when they leave the service and join the private sector, they in their positivity highlight a few flaws, having worked both in and outside the system. Though you don't work for any private company, you just, and we hope that we'll see you soon in some position
hopefully not.
In the government.
No,
but,
hopefully not.
But I want to ask you, why did you write this paragraph? What worries you and why did you choose to highlight this point?
No, this I've been highlighting right through my career. Okay. The worrying bit is the acceptance of dishonest practices. Because if that gets accepted, then there is a serious problem. Because then no one is going to raise a voice against it.
You mean it's a done thing?
Yeah, if it is a done thing, then who is going to raise a voice? The voice will be raised if the society doesn't accept it. The tragedy is some of these practices are coming to be accepted, which is worrisome.
And one more interesting point that you raised is about the criminalization of politics and within which a bureaucrat has to work. You come from Uttar Pradesh, which, if I may say, does not have a great image as far as criminalization of politics is concerned. It's called the Badlands of UP, and you've dug their heels there and worked for 3 or 4 decades. What observation would you like to make?
You know, this entire para that you were reading out is an observation of my experience in UP.
Okay.
And that's where I have, I've looked at the history of criminalization of politics. When we got independence, the politician kept the criminal at a distance so that even the shadow would not fall.
Okay.
Then gradually, criminals started supporting politics. Then they became a part of politics in UP. Yes. And they started, the last stage was their dominance of politics.
Okay.
So you have, I have no harm in taking names like Raja Bhaiya. Yes. If you look at him, he started dominating politics. So there is, no one is feeling bad about being a part of politics. Yeah. They are abrasive about saying that, yes, I'm doing this. That's very sad.
And how would you feel when a lot of officers, we have these stray instances where we see somebody dashing to the feet of a certain politician. And I would imagine the look on your face the moment you see any officer doing anything even close to that.
I'm shocked. Why I'm shocked? Not merely is it unbecoming of an officer, it's not required. What is that officer gaining out of touching the feet of the politician? Absolutely nothing. If you look at officers who've held their heads high, it's not that they have not done well in career. A lot of them have done extremely, extremely well and gone the distance. So by touching the feet of a politician, what is he trying to achieve? That I keep saying, it is not even practical policy to do what some officers do and brings a bad name to the entire bureaucracy. So if a photo gets flashed of a police officer touching the feet of a politician, then people start believing that every police officer does that. I have worked with a large number of police officers and I'm really proud of having worked with them because they held their head high. But the general impression gets known by these exceptions that get flashed in the media, and even those should not happen.
And when you say this shouldn't happen, but it happens sadly, I'm not saying it's prevalent, but it does happen. The nature of the training that an IAS officer goes through, and I have seen that you yourself go to the Lal Bahadur Shastri to give Academy of Administration to give lectures in Mussoorie. What really changes after that? Because they're trained to act in certain ways. There is a certain code of conduct and they don't really need to be beholden to anyone. Is it simply self-ambition that causes?
I think it is primarily subjective to that individual.
Nothing to do with...
I don't think so.
There is no systemic inefficiency.
I don't see any major systemic inefficiency. The problem is the perception of that individual. That is something which I try to do when I go to the academy. Talk to these officers, and I'm in touch with quite a few of them, to tell them, you don't stand to lose anything by being what you should be. You stand to lose perhaps much more now. And that's the tenor of my article. That it is actually practical to be honest. You can hold your head high, get the best of positions, do well, take pride in what you're doing. Why should you go the other way around? But, as I said, it's subjective. Some people have their own choice. My suggestion to them is, then take a conscious choice. Don't blame anybody else. As you said, don't blame the system for it. Within the system, there are outstanding bureaucrats who've held their heads high and have done very well for themselves, have held good positions. It's a question of whether, as a civil servant, as a budding civil servant, or in few years in service, whether I'm looking at civil servants who've done well despite holding their head high, or who probably may have done well despite not holding their head high. Okay. The choice is theirs.
Very interesting. On this note, we'll take a short break and be right back with Free and Frank with Mr. Anil Swarup. Welcome back. Just before the break, we had Mr. Anil Swarup telling us that it's not a systemic inefficiency, it's the personal officer's decisions when he decides to be very, very subversive to a politician or dash his feet. But he makes one more very interesting point in his article. He goes on to say that politicians in many cases are unable, I repeat, unable to see beyond a few months. And the era of a politician who could think in decades and years in the interest of the country is gone. And since Anil Swarup has been a bureaucrat who straddled both worlds, when he entered the service, it was a time when the old guard was, as in say, going out and the new coming in. And what changes do you see, Mr. Swarup?
The changes are very simple. I think because of the instability in politics, I can't blame the politician. He has to win elections. So he has a vision of only winning elections, not a long-term view of things for the country. So he looks at it short-term, and that's where the problem is. When you look at short-term, it is not so much today in Government of India, but in the state, from the state that I come from, in UP, in the 90s, it destroyed the administration in the state, because the governments would be there for a few months, for a couple of years, and they could not look beyond it. So they were taking very short-term decisions which benefited perhaps politically. But as far as the administration was concerned, the economy of the state was concerned, it was devastating.
Destruction, as we both know, is a one-way street. If you go down, then you go down.
It's very difficult to retrieve that.
And if you see, you also spoke that politicians are more interested in transfers and posting of officers, as it provides immediate gains. Now, somebody who I would believe would have been a victim of the system in these kind of issues, how would you look at it?
No, I look at it very differently. To me, transfer is like death for a civil servant. It is inevitable. Why worry about it? Okay. You don't have to worry about it. But like in Hindu philosophy, you are born again. So you do what you got to do. Why bother about transfer?
If I may ask you, any person, you're talking of a captain of the ship, a secretary in the state or the center virtually runs the ministry, and it is on what he thinks and his policies that the sector, we have seen entire sectors growing like anything because of the vision of a secretary, aided and guided by the politician, of course, but it is his vision because he is the guy who executes. Now, if I may ask you, if he's shunted out in 10 months or 12 months, don't you think it's injustice to the whole, it's not to the bureaucracy, injustice to the country?
See, I have looked at these issues differently. My contention is, I will be bothered about issues over which I have control. My transfer is not in my hands. So why bother? If someone transfers about me, I couldn't do a nut about it. Why unnecessarily bother about it? It can be a good issue for discussion. I'll say it's incorrect, it's unjust, I agree with you, but that doesn't really help. My contention is, I will try and do the best in the time that is available to me there, and then do my best in the next assignment.
And I'm worried because you also raise a point in your article, and I may read out for you viewers. Allegiance more than competence has become the criteria for the selection of civil servants to important, he writes it in inverted commas, to important posts.
This is a very unfortunate development. This is a very unfortunate development, because if allegiance becomes the criteria, then the administration, there will be trouble, as we've seen in the recent past.
Okay.
You have people who got selected on account of allegiance, then created trouble for the government. So if you have competent, efficient people, then probably you will not have trouble with them, because they are stable people who would like to do the job as best they can, rather than look towards somebody where if the inclination is different, they end up fighting with their own colleagues. What happened in CBI is something which we can never be proud of. So what do you have? Why do you have such officers sitting there? If you have competent, efficient and stable officers sitting there, this sort of thing will never happen. And it has not happened. You look at other organizations where the selection has been based on merit. The officers have continued there and transformed. Take, for example, the Swachhata Abhiyan. Look at the wonderful work that Parameshwaran Iyer is doing. Stable, good, he's creating an impact in the field. There are many such examples where if you pick up the right officers, not on account of allegiance, but sheer competence and efficiency, they will perform, they'll do well, and it can be visible. Look at Ayushman Bharat. They have picked up a team, one from the ADB, the other Dinesh Arora, who's had experience in RSBY. Look at the wonderful work they're doing. So there are great examples of officers who've been picked up on efficiency and they have demonstrated that they can do. I think the government should look at such officers. Obviously, these officers are not going to walk up to the government to seek an assignment. The government has to look towards them. These officers, like Iyer was called from outside, Indu Bhushan was called from outside. These are ex-IS officers. They were invited, called, and they're doing a wonderful job. I think it can be done because it is being done. We must realize that the exceptions that we have in terms of non-efficient allegiance.
We should make an example of the exceptions by appointing them to positions and encourage this behavior.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you raise an important point where you say bureaucracy has to share the blame for the current state of affairs because it takes two to tango.
Obviously. I mean, we can't say that. I have always felt that politicians has limitations because he has to look for elections. What have I to look at? My job is secure. I will continue to be an IS officer despite being shifted from place A to place B. My salary is secure. Why am I bothered? Why shouldn't I be performing? So I think the bureaucracy is equally to be blamed for the state of affairs now. I mean, this whole habit of blaming on the politicians is incorrect.
Okay. And two statements made by you. A politician would prefer a pliable and dishonest officer, although even he or she would like an efficient bureaucrat. These two things generally are at loggerheads.
It's very simple. See, pliability, because politicians would want primarily the bureaucrat to agree with whatever is being presented. So that's where pliability come in. So if you raise too many questions, the politician will start feeling uncomfortable. So that's why they would want.
So he doesn't really need your feedback on things because you are in charge of the system and you.
No, they do need the feedback. But look at the context in which we are discussing. If my tenures are short, that is the politician tenure is short, yes, then he would look at that. But if his tenure is secure, then the chances are the politician would look for a long-term consequences and go for an efficient bureaucrat.
And if I may ask you, if we see, I'm not talking of the honest bureaucrats who are shunted 30 times in 30 years, but the kind of honest bureaucrats who serve, who not even shunted out, but are known for their delivery. If such bureaucrats are ignored, what example would this show to the younger lot?
It will send wrong signals. If such bureaucrats are shunted out or not given assignments which they should be given or kept in posts where they have virtually nothing to do, it will send wrong signals, and that would do a lot of disservice to governance.
Now, you say that you praise the media in the article, and I'm thankful for it, when you say that there is a greater recognition today, both by the media as well as the public, of the good work being done by bureaucrats. You say that the number could well increase if the bureaucracy also realizes there is no other option. How would you see, how can media hold the hand of a bureaucrat, or they could hold each other's hands to achieve a similar objective?
It's very simple. There is a lot of good work that is happening around us. Right. I mean, as Education Secretary, when I went around the country, I saw amazing work being done within the country, and that's why I keep saying that the solutions to the problem of education in this country will not come from Finland, England, Scotland, Holland, even Swaziland, but from the motherland. And that's where, if the media can actually identify such good work that is happening, give it an exposure that it deserves, then it becomes an aspiration for others to do the same good work. It's already being done, but on a scale that should be scaled further. And that's where the media can play a very, very important role. I do see in some of the cases the media is making a conscious effort. More needs to be done in highlighting good work just to demonstrate that good work is happening and hence it should happen. And if that happens, then others will also aspire to do good work.
And I must say that Mr. Anil Swarup is doing his bit. He has a Twitter handle @Anil Swarup. He talks about nexus of good, all the good work done by young IS officers, and I must say young officers are encouraged by it. And I have my two comments before I end this interview with Mr. Swarup is that we've many times been told by many bureaucrats that India is not a Finland like Mr. Swarup has highlighted. It's like maybe Europe, which is different countries put together, but It's such a big country, it's like a continent, and it takes the bureaucracy to keep it together. A lot of people may not agree, and I would want a 30-second comment on that.
You know, bureaucracy has a very, very important role to play. As I keep saying, bureaucracy hasn't withered away anywhere in the world.
Yes.
And this bureaucracy, there are people who are capable of doing phenomenal work. They have been doing phenomenal work. Look at the times when there are crises, whether it was Tamil Nadu or Kerala. I think the entire bureaucracy came together. So what gives me hope is the fact that there is this potential that is available. What gives me the hope is that there are officers who are doing a good job. What we have to now look at is how we can replicate and scale the good work that is being done by good officers.
That is the takeaway today. Replicate and scale work done by good officers and encourage good officers and appoint them if they are delivering, and set an example for the younger lot to be honest and deliver. We would like to thank Mr. Swaroop. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Policy and Politics. We'll again look you up and invite you on your show very soon, because you keep writing interesting articles and we can't keep away from reaching out to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, viewers.